Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello and salutations to anyone listening to this on the Temple Beth Am podcast, whenever and wherever you are. We are all on Zoom today. Chapter 9 of the book of Exodus, verse 8. We read the verse last week. Anyone who was at my Shabbat afternoon class, we did a long, wonderful discursus on this verse by a 19th and early 20th century Italian sage, Rabbi Umberto Cassuto. And I kind of did that in advance of our looking at Rashi's take on this verse this week. Tova, I hope you're feeling better. You feeling okay? Good. Okay.
Yes, I'm better now.
Good. I'm glad. Because Cassuto took a more kind of historical, encyclopedic approach to deciphering this verse, and Rashi is going to mostly go into language and Old French, but a version of Old French that modern scholars don't really understand. As you'll see, usually when we look at Rashi's turn to Old French, there is some way of iodine tracing what the word meant then to a modern French cognate, and it's much harder in these cases. So it may have been Rashi was confused about the Hebrew word, or it may have been maybe that languages. It's actually amazing that we still can trace a connection in French words over 1,000 years. Okay, let me read the verse again to get us going, and then we'll see what Rashi says. Vayomer Adonai al Moshe v'Aaron. God said to Moses and to Aaron, so we focused on that last week, that he's speaking to both of them. Kechu lachem melochof nechem, speaking all in the plural. Take, and the verb take is in the plural, so that you too take for yourselves or take yourselves. Melochof nechem, the fill of your this, right? The fill of two palms of stuff. Okay, so the image, if we stop the verse right there, is that there are going to be 4 heaping palmfuls of whatever, because each of them have 2. Piach kibshan, the soot of the kiln. Uzurako Moshe, this is God still speaking. This is not Moshe doing it, but God still speaking. And Moses will throw, right? If you take apart the word zurako, it's zarak oto. Right, but the vit turns into an u because the shva under the zayin, so it's uzrako, and Moshe will throw it where? Hashamayma, towards the heavens, le'enei Pharaoh, which could mean several different things. It can mean in the presence of Pharaoh. Someone suggested last week maybe it means into the eyes of Pharaoh, in which case, because it literally means the eyes, in which case is Moshe throwing it in 2 directions, up and forward, but something like in the presence of Pharaoh, okay? When we read the verse last week, we spoke a little bit about what the word piach might mean. Rashi will go into it deeper, but it's probably from the root nafach, and the nun of the root disappears in some forms. So nafach means to blow, and piach, therefore, is something which can be blown, and soot is easily blown. In fact, it's the remnant of something which has been burned, which can be blown by wind. Okay, that's kind of where we were. Anyone want to say anything on the verse itself before we look at Rashi's take on it? Okay. Larry, Herman, do you want to read the Rashi, which is mostly going to be, read the Rashi, but I'm going to pull up some pages from Sefaria on Rashi's use of French. Go ahead.
I'm not in a position to read, sorry.
No problem. Tova, do you want to read?
Not good on Rashi. Try somebody else.
Okay. God, I got one more and I strike out. Sue, do you want to read?
Unmute, Sue.
Okay. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not I haven't been used to lately, and I'm looking for my unmute button. Melo hafnechem.
Good luck pronouncing this.
Huh? Yes.
Good luck pronouncing this.
Thank you. Yelonesh beloes. It's whatever that means.
Right. So belaz means in Old French, beloazi in the foreign language. Usually the yud, shin, when Rashi transliterates Old French into Hebrew, we have to kind of guess at how he's doing so, because even if we know the way the roots of Old French, how it was pronounced, right? You ever see these videos of people trying to not predict, it's the wrong word, to reconstruct how Shakespeare sounded in Shakespearean English? And there's some amazing videos where they have painstakingly gone through lines, and based on what they consider to have been rhyming puns that we miss because in our pronunciation of English they don't rhyme, they've been able to try to figure out, these words rhymed back then, and we don't know for sure, but there are these reconstructions of what Shakespeare's English sounded like, right? Even if we understand the word, what they sounded like. So go back 400 years earlier to imagine what Rashi's French sounded like is very, and therefore how he would transliterate into Hebrew is very different than understanding the meaning, which parentheses and parentheses makes the consistency of Hebrew that much more amazing, because there's no guesswork in Hebrew pronunciation, right? I mean, in modern Jew speak, there have been Yiddishizations and things like that, and we know that like the soft gimel might have pronounced a little bit differently, but the word Shabbat was 2,000 years ago was Shabbat. It may have been Shabbat, but we can guess how it was pronounced, right? So the Yud Shin ending in a Rashi, it may have been the French EIS, or EI, or EA, or something like that. So Ulvinier, who knows? Look what Otsar Loazé Rashi says. So this is, again, a wonderful single volume text that has been Safariaized, that goes through literally every situation in Rashi's commentary on the Torah and the Talmud, using linguistics and etymological sources to try to figure out what he said. There's also, by the way, I think we discussed this on the Talmud, not on Rashi's commentary. I don't think on the Torah. There's a work called the Targum, which translates Rashi's Old French into Yiddish, and then you have to go from the Yiddish to the English. But look what it says on Yiddish. So this guy is retransliterating it into English as jelones, right? And glunim. I don't know what the Hebrew word glunim means, but then he puts in parentheses midot hayovesh, dry weight, right? So there's a different words for dry weight and liquid weight, or dry measurements of dry stuff.
This is all about the handfuls?
This is all about trying to figure out what the hell Rashi meant when he translated the word chofnechem into Old French. I will tell you before we read this, I don't understand every word of this, because this is now very technical, grammatical, Hebrew grammatical discursus on what Rashi is saying. Bein hamon girsaot, amongst the many versions of Rashi, boltot haotiot hamechuvanot lefinuach hanal. Certain letters kind of stand out that point us towards this pinuach. A pinuach is a deciphering. O lemila krova, or to a word that is similar to it. Could go in yelonesh, glonesh, and maybe glonesh in French is related to glunim, which is the Hebrew word that he's putting up there. And he even says in that bracket in the second line, kamo Hashem ha'ivri, like the Hebrew word. Shoneh legamrehu hanusach poye sheba arba kitayad. Very interesting. In 4 manuscripts of Rashi, there's an entirely different word than the one we have. We have a word that looks like yelonesh or something, and there are 4 manuscripts of Rashi where the word he uses for the Old French for chofnechem is poye, or however you would pronounce pei vav yud yud lamed. Kafi hanireh, it seems, ratzu lekarev et hala'az legizron poing. It seems that he wanted to bring that French close to this root, this idea of poing, which means egrof. What's egrof? A fist, a fistful, right? Aval milak mo poye, but any word similar to poye, eno yedua, no one knows it. Yitachein, it's possible, Shirashi histapek, b'hatzba'a al midah gdola, that he was just kind of wrong. He made a mistake as he was trying to associate this with one major word. It's really interesting. We always assume that Rashi knows what he's talking about, even if we find some of his answers to be fanciful or hard to take in. But this 20th century scholar saying, we don't really know what Rashi was doing by pointing us to this word Yelonesh, and there are certain manuscripts that disagree with it entirely. Okay? So that's on, and we know what it is. It's a fistful, but what Rashi was doing, the French were not sure. I saw Barry's hand, but he walked away. Rick, and then Barry.
Hi. So I wanted to share. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I wanted to share what Silverman had. Okay. The red
Please.
Silverman. First of all, up above, right when they're translating it, he has old French, Join Chez. I'll spell it for you. Joincheiz. So I don't see, yeah. Well, Shay would be ER on the end or ET. I don't know if you pronounce the Z or not. I'm not that great at French at all, but there's a Z there. So I didn't see it in this Safari here, so I thought maybe we could look that up. And then there's another one I wanted to tell you. So should I do that now, or you want to do that first? Or I don't know.
No,
it's up
keep
to
going.
you.
Keep going.
Okay, so that's up above, and then it goes English double handfuls. Okay, so but he has joint. I'm thinking it's join, right? But chaise is a chair, Chaise, but that's a totally different word. So this is Cheiz. Anyway, so then the footnote, it says, according to Berliner, I'm not sure who he was, this word has not yet been explained as an Old French term for dust or soot, in parentheses. And then he goes, Heidenheim, whoever Heidenheim was, suggested the emendation with a pei on the front of it. So pei, vav, lamed, vav, yud, samech, which they go i.e., for example, pulvis, Pulvis, and then comma, dust.
You're actually now reading the comment on the next one, not this one. So,
I'm sorry.
So Paul, you're reading the comment on piach. We're on the comment on chofnehem. So hold that one.
Okay. Sorry.
We'll get to the piach in a second, because there are two in this one comment of Rashi. There are two times where he brings in Old French. Okay. Okay.
But the pay being dropped, I thought would help here, but I guess it doesn't. So
no, he's talking about pay being dropped in the Old French of the next site, the next word, not this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Barry.
So
yeah.
I'll look up join chaise. I'll Google it.
Yeah, I don't know enough about French to say anything about that. I don't see Rosemary today, so she can't help us. Barry.
Okay, so you went back to the question, does Amy have any comment? And I was too slow in finding my hand, but here I am, going back to the question. And in the phrase here, we have hafnechem, handfuls, plural, but we have uzrako, singular. So what's the plural of handfuls becoming a singular to throw? And I don't want to blow the last Shabbat, but that's the essence of what you were discussing.
Right. So Kasuto gives his answer to that question. The uzurako means, and Moshe will throw it. So the handfuls have turned into a single amount of substance, right? The first half of the verse is each of you take handfuls, and then something like, and Moshe will throw all of it, right? That's how it becomes singularized. It becomes a single collection of the soot. Okay, so that's what Rashi says on chofnechem. And now let's keep going. He's going to, back to you, Sue. What does he say on piach hakibshan?
Well, I will go on, except I want to know if Hofnechem appears anywhere else in the Torah, or is this one of these?
Yeah, we have it in the sacrifices that oftentimes that the Kohen is asked to take Malo Chofnav, a fill of his hand. We have that in the Torah reading for Yom Kippur. The ritual Yom Kippur, there were handfuls of incense, usually with respect to the Ketoret.
Okay. All right, we're going on. Piach Kipshan, we're focusing on that, the soot of the furnace. Davar anafach mina gechalim amumim nisrafim bekivshan.
Okay, put a period there. So davar hanipach. How would you, this, remember, I told you that piach probably comes from the root napach with a nun. So in this form, the nun is back. Davar hanipach, that which is
like a nafach, like a thing that blows.
Right, a thing that is blown, or literally, because it's in the nifal, a thing that is blown, something that is blown. And
but then it also, I mean, litnapeach is like this. Does that have any association? No? Don't we to flip over? Isn't that
lehit hapeach, like hafuch?
I think there's a nun in there sometimes. Like I don't know. I don't know.
So that which is blown, so keep it, min hagchalim ha'amumim hanisrafim bakivshan. From what?
From those dead charcoal coals that were burnt in the furnace.
Good. And that word amumim interested me, so I want to share with you because I was not aware of that before. I want to share what Jastrow says about amumim. So amam, bottom right. Hold on, where is it?
I think lehit napeach might be
here, middle left, amam. To be pressed and to be dim. And it's kind of a Jastrow jackpot because the example that Jastrow gives for this root is gechalim she'amamu, not from our exact source, but from a Tosefta Shabbat, coals which have begun to die down.
Oh.
It's not a root that I know from other places, but to die down, right? So if you push that into Rashi's sentence, right? These are so piach is the thing which is blown from the coals which have died down after having been burnt in the kiln, right? We knew that. Rashi just breaking down for us, yeah.
No longer glowing.
Yeah.
Initially, they're glowing, and after they've blown and landed where they're landed, they no longer glow.
Yeah. Okay, and now Rashi brings us to another French word.
Yes. Although lehit napeach means to swell. Like if I have a swollen finger, napeach.
That's right. Right. Nafeach means to be, because it's also like the word for bellows, right? It's the thing that you blow into, so it swells. Yeah.
Okay. Beloaz ulvish.
Okay, let's see what Otsar Loaze Rashi has to say about that. Okay. So he turns it into an English transliteration, Hebrew olve. And he says the Hebrew is gechalim, right? Coals. And look what he says on this. This is entry 3081. Shnei haloazim hachronim. These last two instances of Old French, ein lahem eduyot brurot v'chad mashmoyot. There's no clear testimony or single understanding of their meaning. It's really interesting. No one really knows what Rashi's talking about here. Ach shnehem mofi'im makom zeh. But both of them appear at this spot, Biglusar Shel Paris, one of the famous Paris manuscripts of Rashi, Sheyatsa Laor, that was published, in the following situation. So this is basically the author of Otsar Loaze Rashi saying Rashi has tried to solve a puzzle by giving us these two French words. It doesn't really help that much. We're not exactly sure what it means. Okay, Joanna. I see your hand.
It's interesting that the shorosh can mean to swell up also, because there's this imagery here of like the act itself communicating to Paro, like what's going to happen to you. Paro, your ego is all swollen and puffed up now, but look what's going to happen. We're throwing it up And then you're going to land and, those embers are going to burn out and you're going to be nothing.
Oh, it's interesting you say it that way. I thought you were going in a different direction, which is that the impact of this plague is that your flesh is going to be swollen and blown up because that's what the boils are. So there could be that in triplicate, and I hadn't thought about that before. That the root, right? We talked on Shabbat afternoon about how there could be like a perfect plot match between the source of this plague being the soot from the kiln in which the Israelites did their hardest labor in creating the bricks for the building works, and now where it could be that the word piach, right, comes from the root, which means to blow up and to blow out, which is what's going to happen to them on their skin, which I hadn't thought about it either. So great. I like the pigtails, by the way. It's a good look. Great. And then, even though Rashi's kind of already said this, read the last line of Rashi, Sue.
Piach on piach?
Yeah.
Okay, piach. Lashon afacha, שהרוח מפיחן ומפריחן. It comes from hafacha. Piach comes from hafacha, something that flies around. That, right? שהרוח, that the wind can make it fly around.
Yeah, essentially, right? To make it blow and to make it fly. So he kind of already said that when he says above davar hanipach, but I think if you really want to read it super technically, and the first part of Rashi says davar hani. It's a sentence. Davar hanipach min hagachalim ha'umim, the thing which flies out from the simmering coals, and then at the last line he says, and this is from what Hebrew root? Piach, from the root hafacha. Good. I see Rick and I see Larry.
Hi. So I just wanted to. I have two things. One, le'enei faro. Whenever I see le'enei something, it reminds me of the Israelites who thought that they were grasshoppers. We were like grasshoppers in their eyes. So what the image is or what's happening may not be true or not. Because we weren't grasshoppers. So it's performing all these things in front of Pharaoh. It may not be like it is, but anyway, I discovered, so that wasn't much, but I found something yesterday that had to relate to Pharaoh letting us go and worship. It was on the news, or it was on Yahoo yesterday. Could I just share it for 30 seconds?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this was on Yahoo yesterday. So apparently they discovered some ancient writings from Constantine, the emperor, who was at first he was persecuting the Christians, and then he changed. And what the letter said was that he was allowing the people of the town to go celebrate their religious festival in another town as long as they built a temple to what Constantine considered his divine ancestors. So, and that's what they're digging up, is this temple that these pagans built to the divine ancestors, the Christians did. So he would let the Christians go to some festival. So, it just reminded me of Pharaoh saying, okay, you can go worship your God, whatever, as long as you worship me too. So it's a common theme that a dictator will want you to keep worshiping him no matter what else you're doing. So I wanted to throw that in. But it just happened yesterday. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Listen, the entire world and the news cycle is revolving around where we are in our Rashi class. And I just appreciate that about reality. Larry, your turn.
Thank you. So I'm sorry if I'm a little incoherent. I was late getting back from shul, and I got some things going on here. But in any case, I'm looking at the altar comment on the translation is not, I don't think, particularly interesting, but the commentary is the beginning of the second half of the 10 plagues is marked by a switch from the set formula for launching the plague with an outstretched staff. I think we talked about that last time.
And we also talked about it a little bit on Shabbat afternoon. Go ahead.
I apologize for not making it. and Mark switched from the set formula. This scooping up a soot and casting it skyward intensifies the ominousness of the moment and has the look of an act of sympathetic magic. The black dust from the kiln turns into broadcast contamination, a plague clearly paired with the preceding plague of livestock pestilence, but affecting man as well as beasts. So first, my comment is, this is kind of like the beginning of epidemiology, that they knew that there may be airborne contamination.
Interesting.
That's a reach. But it strikes me that that's what was going on. And they thought that this was being contaminated through the contamination was taking place through the air. But why is it that Alter says it's paired with livestock pestilence? Because I don't remember there being any sort of what he calls broadcast contamination with the previous plague.
Does he mean that the previous plague also hit the animals?
Affecting man. Yeah, maybe that could be. Okay, that could be. It had nothing to do with the airborne contamination, but rather that affected the animals.
I think so, because that's obviously what Dever did. It was specifically focused on the animals, and it's the first of the plagues where it's specifically mentioning that the animals were plagued. Where you can imagine the horses. I don't think they had horses, but I'm sure the livestock weren't enjoying all of the frogs. But I don't think that the livestock are mentioned as specific targets of the plague before the fifth one.
The horses, they had horses for the chariots to chase the Israelites.
That's true. Okay. That's it for Chof Nechem and Piach Kibshan. But now Rashi has a third comment, so we'll bring back Sue to finish what Rashi has to say about this one. We don't hear you.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Uzrako Moshe. And he threw it. Moshe threw it. וכל דבר הנזרק בכוח, אינו נזרק אלא ביד אחד.
Okay, what does that mean?
Okay, everything that was thrown with force isn't. Wait, אינו נזרק ביד אחד, but it's thrown with one hand.
Right. Remember that the construction ein ... and ella is best translated in English as only, right? Anything that is thrown with force is only thrown with one hand, right? Just think about that. Even though it's somewhat counterintuitive, using two hands gives you more muscle, it is very hard to throw something. You could throw a baseball with one hand much farther than you can throw a soccer ball with two hands, right? Because you don't have as much of the torque, of the of the leverage, right? So what Rashi is saying is here, from the fact that it used the word zorek, and there are super commentaries in Rashi that said, as opposed to lahashlich, which means just to like cast, which is the other verb that's been used here. But basically we're being told he really threw it. He became like Sandy Koufax. He was a shot putter. He really threw this, okay, because it's one hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I do have a question of how you take a double handful of ash and then all of a sudden throw it with only one hand, but we'll go back to that.
Rashi knows that was your question and he's about to answer
it. Okay. Are nisim arbe echad shehechazik kumtso shel Moshe מלוא חפניים שלו ושל אהרון.
Okay, so do that part.
Okay, because behold, there were so many miracles in there. Does he mean miracles in the sand? That's so many.
Meaning this verse represents many miracles. The first thing that is miraculous about this, he says, if you look closely and realize that the word zarak means to throw, which means he did it with one hand, is that?
Oh, and that one handful of Moshe's contained as much as two handfuls.
Correct. Right.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. He was able to grab with one kometz, one handful,
And Aaron too.
yeah, so 4 times as much, right? They were two double handfuls, and apparently, and he knows this because of the word zarak, he was able to take all of that in his giant hand, in his Donald Trumpian hand, and pick it up and throw all of that out. So that's miracle number one, that he developed very large hands in this moment. Go ahead.
And another, did I read more in Hebrew?
No. The echad.
Ve'echad she'alach la'avak al kol eretz Mitzrayim. And one miracle?
And another one.
Miracle?
They're saying
another miracle is that this stuff flew all over the whole entire country of Egypt.
Good. Sue, read the first phrase of verse 9 in the Torah.
In the Torah, first phrase, Va'aya la'avak al kol eretz Mitzrayim, and the dust spread all over the Eretz Mitzrayim.
Right. So sometimes you just gotta give Rashi a big hug. Like, it's so sweet. He's always looking for anything that will allow him, and almost always will have allowed the midrashis from 1,000 years before him to just expand the scope of the grandeur of our heroes, and the grandeur of God. And he pulls this from the word zarak. Sometimes zarak just means zarak. He says, no, this was a throw. It was a throw, which means that his hand miraculously grew, so he's able to throw so much. And he really was, one of the great hurlers of all time, and he threw it throughout all of Egypt, right? Pulling that out of that one word. And again, like almost always, he's not pulling this out of nowhere. This midrash, a version of this midrash, appears in the Tanhuma and other places. To Rachel's question, I don't know, but if you can find such a picture, I would love to see it. And it's unclear if, even though I'm kind of being playful with it, if Rashi's image of the miracle is a large hand, which he doesn't say explicitly, or just, I don't know, a compressing of the 4 handfuls of the dust into something that he could hold with his normal size hand. That it sort of matters, doesn't matter. But I'm not sure Rashi is actually imagining, an expanded hand, but just a miraculousness, like one cruise of oil lasting 8 days, right? You don't in that miracle, you don't have to think, well, did the oil compress? Was 1/8 of it used each day? It lasted 8 days. That's what we need to know. Okay, Rick and Barry.
A question. So we went past kumtso in the Rashi, right? In the English, Silverman again, it says one that Moses's closed fingers, and then in parentheses, they just have kamatz, kuf mem final sadi. So I wanted to ask you, is that related to the vowel kamatz?
No.
Is there any?
A kometz is a measurement of dry flat. We see that also in a lot in the book of Vayikra. It's also kmitza is this finger, 4th finger. In Hebrew, every finger has a different name. Agudal, thumb. Etzba, the pointer. I don't want to do it, but the middle one, amma. Kmitza, the 4th finger, and zeret. And so I think the connection between, I'm not sure why the 4th one is kmitza, but somehow, I don't know, I guess if you're taking a handful, is your 4th finger the one guiding you? I don't know. But the word for handful and the root for the 4th finger are related to one another. Yeah. Sue, did you want to respond to that on kmitza kometz, and then we'll go to Barry, or something else?
Something else that I don't know how to put my hand down. Oh, there it is. Something else, I was thinking back when we said at the very beginning of this whole sentence that it was, he threw it up or threw it out. It looks like up, le'enei Pharaoh, but he threw it into Pharaoh's eyes, which sounds like his eyes to me. Like, enei Pharaoh is enei Pharaoh. And this whole thing that, and then he threw it all, in one hand and all over Egypt, but really, Le'nei Pharaoh accomplishes all of it, and I'm just thinking that he basically blinded Pharaoh with this piach, and that is all of Egypt. Pharaoh is all of Egypt.
Interesting.
And so like that, and as far as Pharaoh knew, this was all over Egypt. This was everyone because he was now blinded by this stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for both of those points, Sue. It's actually fascinating to me that even though colloquially a ne pharaoh means in the presence of, that Rashi does not pick up on just the pregnant possibility of a midrashic understanding of it, of Moshe throwing it into his eyes, because Rashi knows both things, right? So Rashi didn't, but Sue Chesroni did, and all is well in the world. Barry, and then Tova, and then Larry.
Well, Rabbi Kligfeld, I'm going to ask you for some miracle you're on your foot. How does the Sandy Koufax one-handed pitch become a box that can be thrown with a Sandy Koufax pitch?
Oh, from Shabbat afternoon, you mean?
Yeah. What is he throwing?
Yeah.
I'm going to wait for that.
What Barry's referencing is that one of the things that Kasuto said in his long comment on this verse is that, you, reader, are wondering how it went from both of them taking two handfuls and Moshe throwing it. Kasuto answers it differently than Rashi does. He says basically the instruction is both you go in there. The double handfuls is representing an amount. Go take that amount, put it in a container, and then take that container to Pharaoh. Pharaoh wasn't in the kiln. Pharaoh doesn't hang out where the peons hang out. Carry that to Pharaoh, and in Pharaoh's presence, Moses, maybe even one handful at a time. Kasuto didn't need miracle here. One full handful at a time, take it out and throw it up in the air in Pharaoh's presence.
Oh, multiple pitches.
Multiple pitches, yes. Tova and then Larry.
Yeah, just a question of clarification on Uzrako, because my text has it translated as sprinkle, which seems completely different from what we're talking about. So I just wanted to ask, does it explicitly mean throw, or can it also mean something like toss, which is different and you can do with two hands?
Yeah, it's a good question, particularly because where the word zarak appears mostly in Torah Hebrew is our rituals inside the temple, which really is sprinkling. Like the sprinkling of the blood is either zarak or lehazot, right? So it's not Sandy Koufax, it's not an Olympic shot putter, it's a toss sprinkle. So the fact that Rashi, who certainly knows that, is using this as a way of proving, not just suggesting, proving that this was a throw that could only be done by one hand is a little bit of selective etymology work for him. Yeah. In the book of Vayikra, when we get there, you'll see Zarak a lot, and pay attention to it in the next few months when we get there in the Torah reading, and it's all happening inside the Kodesh Kodashim or inside the temple. These were not long distance throws.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Tova. Larry?
So I guess I'm fixated on the epidemiology, and it never occurred to me before, and I'm sure someone's commented on it, that the plagues are divided into different categories, and these are the only two. The previous one and this are the only two that are actually diseases, right? Everything else is either natural phenomenon or having something to do with infestation of various animals. And
right. The question is the problem of the infestation like that they will devour everything, or that they might cause diseases? But there's not a direct reference to illness other than these two. Correct. One for the one, and these 5 and 6. Going back to something that Barry said last week, there are a lot of ways of dividing these. Like Kasuto sees these as sets of 3 plus the 10th, right? That you could see a cycle of that, but you can also see 5 and 6 as the fulcrum of the 10, right? Because if you have an even number, both the two middle ones are the fulcrum, and it's 5 and 6, Dever and Shechin, that are the ones that represent disease.
And the only reason I'm commenting on that is because it is rather miraculous in an unfortunate way that disease can spread so quickly because it's airborne and it doesn't take very long. And I'm thinking of this right now because my granddaughter came down with a terrible stomach virus, which then she got it from her school and spread and then spread to her parents, and now say apparently it's also spread to Diane, and it just these sorts of diseases can move very quickly. So not so surprising that it spread all over Egypt so rapidly, being a disease. And if you will, I just have one more question, because as you know, I take attendance, and I don't know who iPhone 32393770110 is.
Larry, that's Baruch Kaplan.
Baruch Kaplan. Thank you, Baruch.
You're welcome, Larry.
Good to see you, Bill. Great. We closed 2023 without Larry giving out attendance awards, and who had made the most number of classes, and giving out Jolly Rancher candies for those who had the highest percentage of attendance. Okay, looking at Rachel's comment, are there commentaries on the nature of the sud? Maybe that is as important as how the sud is thrown. Yeah, when the question is, are there commentaries on, the answer is almost always yes. And Shabbat afternoon, we focused basically on that, on Kasuto, drawing out the relationship between the substance through which this plague is created and the origin of that substance. The origin of that substance is the sweat of the brows of the Israelite slaves, whose hardest and hottest work were in that kiln. And what is the remnant of hard work in the kiln? Kasuto says, he says, the thing which is burned up and blows into the air dissipates, and the bricks leave the factory. But on the sides of the walls of that kiln, you can see the proof of the torturous work that was done underneath it. Okay, good. That was verse 8. Let's go to verse 9. Carol, do you want to read verse 9?
Sure. Okay, let's see. V'haya le'avak al kol eretz Mitzrayim, v'haya al ha'adam ve'al ha'behema l'shechin poreach ababuot b'chol eretz Mitzrayim.
Good. And before you start translating, we are mid quotation marks. God is still speaking about what's going to happen. So that's the tense of v'haya, is and it will be, because it's a vav hayipuch. So God is still predicting. Nothing's actually happened yet.
Okay, it will become a dust on all of the land of Egypt, and it will be on the people, on man and on beast, as shechin. That's boils, or whatever we call it. Poreach, isn't that like blossom, like Hashkedia Parachat?
Exactly, and that's a very timely reference, Carol, right, considering what tomorrow is, right? Right, a perach is a flower, right? So some kind of a flowering, blooming shechin.
Blooming into Abba buot is blisters,
right,
on all of the land of Egypt, throughout the land of Egypt.
I wonder if Avabuot is the inspiration for Abani Bio Boy Bev, because that's what I think about every time I see Avabuot. I think about that Eurovision song. Was that Israel's Eurovision song in the late 70s? Abani Bio Boy Bev. Maybe it's just me. You might know the modern Hebrew. What's a bu'ah in modern Hebrew? Bet vav ayin hey. Sue? Sue? I can see you want to say it.
It's a bubble.
It's a bubble, right? So a bu'ah is a bubble, like just blowing bubbles. It's clearly related to avabu'ot, something which bubbles up, right, on the skin. That's what a blister is. It's a bubble on the skin, okay? Good, right? So God is, again, still in the predictive mode. Once Moses, you throw the piach into the heavens in Pharaoh's presence, it will become like the dust will be all over the land of Egypt. It's going to go on people. It's going to go on animals. And what will it be? A flowering, bubbling boil on all the land of Egypt. Okay. Lovely. Very descriptive. Questions, comments before we look at the Rashi? On anything on the verse itself, the language, plot line? Going once? Okay. Rashi on L'shchin Poreach Avabuot. And the micro syntax of that three-word phrase, I think, is the following: that shchin is the noun, poreach is describing what the thing is doing, and avabuot is the object. So it's going to become a boil which flowers bubbles, right? It's a shchin which is poreach. What is it poreaching? It's poreaching avabuot, right? So it's possible to do that in different ways, but I think that's the simplest way of understanding it. It's a sore which continues to flower and produce avabuot, bubbles. Okay, go ahead.
The other thing I was going to comment is that they do say Kol Eretz Mitzrayim twice, which is a little bit repetitive, but I guess it makes it flow better. Okay, Lishchin Porech Ababuot, Katargumot, like Unclus says, Lishichana Sage Ababuin.
And in that three-word Aramaic phrase of Unclus, what's the only word that is sort of different, a different root than the Hebrew?
Sage.
Sage, right? So Shichana in Aramaic is clearly Shechin in Hebrew. Avabuin is clearly Avabuot, but Sage. Anyone know what the Aramaic word Sage means? Samech Gimel Yud? I can just tell you, or it's more fun to look at the Jastrow so you can see it in the original. One second. So I thought I pulled this one up before, but it's not here. So it must have closed by accident. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay, Sagi. To swell, to rise, to grow, to spread, to increase, and to thrive. Sagi also means, as an adjective, enough. And it could also mean lots of. It's a lot. It means a lot of things. But here, the verb sagi means to swell, rise, and grow. Right. So that's a perfectly good rendering of poreach, something which is growing, sprouting. And I think what Rashi is saying is you don't have to think of flower here. I think Rashi knows that we might think of poreach as vegetation. And he says, look what Onkelos did. He translated it into a more generic word that is not about plants. It's just about growing bigger, thriving, and swelling, and therefore it's almost as Rashi saying the Aramaic is either better than the Hebrew, or Onkelos understood that poreach can also mean just a general growing. Okay, so a growing, a shchin which grows avabuot. Okay, and keep reading she'al yado.
She'al yado tzomchin bahen buot, that on it or through it. I do not know what tzomchin is.
What is tzemach? A tzomeach. Also, you have that in the first chapter of Breshit. It's similar to poreach, to grow. Litzmoach means to grow and to sprout. Okay.
And the buot, I'm assuming, is kind of like the blisters,
right?
The word for the blisters.
Correct.
So it's a thing through which blisters grow.
Right. What's the bahen?
In it or through it? Through them?
I think it's literally in them, and the them meaning the shchin on the bodies. It's if it's saying like it's going to land on you, and by means of them, on the people are going to grow these bubbles. That they're going to be, and it's going to be like a, I don't know, like an active culture, right? Like you think, how if you're creating a starter dough, right? Like it's actually living and growing in that little dish you have it in, that whatever's going to be on the Egyptians, it's going to be a thing which has its own animation and is growing bubbles on your body. How horrific. Okay. We sort of understood that from Shechin Poreach Habuot, but I think he's just kind of breaking it down to describe exactly how he imagines it was actually going to happen. And again, it's still in the going to happen stage of the verse, not happened yet. It's going to be the next verse, which we may or may not get to today, where it actually takes place. Barry.
Again, you would ask questions and a little bit slow, so I'm going back. The sweat of the Israelites in the kilns. Being a ceramist, and I'd mentioned this before, normally you think of a kiln as an oven that you put things into and fire, and you close the door and you bring them out again. In Egypt, we're talking about bricks that were very large. Building the pyramids, these were extremely large and heavy items. So the size of these kilns were actually the size of a factory that the Israelites are inside of and working and lifting and moving these huge, heavy objects. So that there's a lot of soot and a lot of sweat inside these things.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. And it also might be someone mentioned the Shabbat midah keneged midah, measure for measure, not just that the soot is taken from the place where the Israelites did their hardest work, but if you really want to nail it down, what kind of injury might someone get from working too close to the fire of a kiln? Kind of a burn that is likely to blister up and create these pockets of pus on your body, right? So what the Egyptians are going to experience in Plague 6 is probably very connected to what the Torah imagines the Israelites experience as a result of their labor in the very place from which that plague began. Tova?
Sorry. Just to clarify, Egyptian mud bricks, though they were sometimes fired in kilns, were also just as commonly sun-dried, and they weren't that big. They were, like this size. So it's not the same image as the giant granite blocks of the pyramid being moved, which were done by a very different process and by big teams. So it would have been probably freestanding kilns, not a great big kiln room that you were taking massive blocks into.
Okay.
But another comment back to it was that non-fired clay, greenware, in one season of rain will disappear. But kiln-fired bricks will last over many seasons, many centuries.
Right. No, I realize that. But if you look at a lot of the ruins in the Delta that were, storehouses and things that were built of bricks, they in fact did basically disappear fairly quickly. But in any case, the kilns wouldn't have been big kiln rooms. They would have been smaller standing kilns.
So Tova, this is precisely the reason why I thought you would have thrilled at the Shabbat afternoon class, because you're right on target, because Kasuto goes there. I talked about the class that Kasuto was in the rare-ish overlap of late 19th century, early 20th century, very frum commentators in the Torah who were intellectuals and academics. And as Stevie pointed out the class, and that happened more commonly in Italy than in other parts of, certainly more in Eastern Europe. And so he says something very similar. Let me see if I can get it down. So I'll just read it in English because it's quicker. Why they need to take handfuls of soot is not stated, and at first glance the thing seems odd, but it is worth paying some attention to it, for the kiln is a type of factory within which workers do their work with fire, and among other things they burn the bricks with fire. Indeed, although the Egyptians before the Roman period mostly used bricks that were dried by the heat of the sun, burning the bricks in the kiln was also customary among them, and specifically in buildings from the era of the 19th dynasty with which Ramses II was associated, who was the very pharaoh that enslaved Israel, and from the area of the 20th dynasty, there have been found several instances of bricks burned by fire. Now, I do not know enough about that to know whether or not he's correct. There was no carbon dating yet, as Stevie pointed out, but I have to believe that he was pretty sure he was correct, because he was an academic in addition to being a Torah scholar, and he seems to believe that in addition to the more common way of creating bricks, as you mentioned, Tova, there apparently was some archaeological proof that there were also kiln-burned bricks from that dynasty in Egypt. So that's what Kasuto said. So thanks for that, Tova. Great. Yes, so do I, Sue. We all love when Tova's expertise comes out in this class. Wonderful. Okay. I think that's the end of that comment on Rashi. Rashi is now going to say something on the word shechin itself. Anything else before I call back on Carol to speak? Okay, so now on the word shechin itself, and we'll probably end with this.
Shechin, Lashon Chamimut, the language of heat.
Right. So now that Rashi has told you what he thinks the plague was like, he's kind of going backwards a bit. Like, if I were Rashi, I would start with what the word means and then tell you how to understand the verse. He's now saying, yeah, we all know what Shechin means, but why does it mean what it means? He thinks that the etymology of the root, that shin chet nun, has to do with heat, okay, which makes double sense. It makes sense in terms of the origin of this plague. And it makes sense to, you have a blister on your body. It is hot to the touch. We know it's hot to the touch because, our blood cells are going towards it to fight an infection. But it is heat. And then he gives us some Mishnaic examples, or one at least, the Harbeh.
Harbeh yesh b'lashon Mishnah. Many examples are in the language of the Mishnah. Shana shechuna, which I guess hot year.
Right. In Masechet Yoma, page 53, there's a reference to Shabbat Shchuna. If it was a chaf, shin chaf nun, that means to dwell, like Shechina. Shin chet nun, I do not know a modern Hebrew equivalent, so if you know, let me know. But it's clear in context in the Talmud that a Shabbat Shchuna is a hot year. So Shechin.
What's a neighborhood? Shchuna is
chaf. Chaf.
Chaf?
That's shin chaf nun. I don't know. I mean, I don't know every modern Hebrew word, but I'm not aware of a modern Hebrew word of shin chet nun, meaning heat, but maybe there is. I don't know. Where's Vered when we need her? So that's Shechin, a hot plague that plagues the animals and the adults, that stems from the hottest place where the Israelites worked to create the buildings for the Egyptians. Good. That brings us to the end of verse 9, and it brings us exactly to 12:30. 12:30, 9:30. My 12:30, your 9:30. Larry, you were going to say something. You had a funny emoji up there.
That was because I missed the raised hand signal. I don't think it makes any sense, but shechein, that chein, but that wouldn't be anything to do with hot.
Like grace?
Yeah. Chein v'chesed. Shechein. No, yeah.
It would be a fun game to play, like a Notri Kun, right? Like the Notri Kun that play that. Why is one of God's names Shaddai? It's Shaddai, the one who is enough, the Almighty. They know that's what the word means, but they're just kind of playing with that.
There you go.
I'll see if I can do a little bit of research on modern Hebrew if I find a word that I had forgotten. But at first glance, I don't know of it. And
I don't have my book that's in my lockers, for when we have live class. So I'm using Silverman for the first time, which is awkward for me to use. But I noticed he translates in the first Rashi, he translates it, boils into blains. I'd never seen that word. I'm surprised that nobody who uses Silverman didn't comment on it. And I just looked it up. Blains.
You never had chilblains?
No.
Chilblains are your extremities turning into like purplish wounds from the cold, from chilblains, from exposure to the cold. Yeah.
So in that case, it wouldn't be like a boil or like an eruption, right? It'd be something else.
Well, I think my understanding is that a blain is a more generic word for kind of a wound on your skin, and the question is, what's the source of the blain?
Yeah, I looked it up, and it says inflammatory swelling or sore.
Yeah. Chilblains. Don't. I've had them. They're awful. Avoid them if you can.
Rabbi, we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week. Be well. Shalom.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tba-am.org. la.org.